Broomarium. There were as many servants living in Caddy's house as there were family members, more if you counted Caddy's governess. Wilkes, the manservant, sat in the front hall fanning himself with his skinny black hat. He was still having palpitations, he said, from yesterday's magical journey to Bishop Maine. I should never have carried Miss Caddy up that hill to the house just now. It might have been the death of me. Ah, you're just a lazy old soul, said his wife, Bertha, whisking off Neriah's coat. Neriah felt funny taking off her coat without hearing the Avies' familiar, "Won't you take off your coat and stay a while?" Bertha's black skirts and white apron billowed about her, and even in that small space she looked like a stout ship sailing in a brisk wind. "It's the dust and the damp that's giving me palpitations," she added. Her monstrous white hat bobbled as she opened a tiny, almost invisible door tucked under the curved oak banister. She took a broom from an angular hideaway beneath. "The house has been closed for a long time. Now scat, all of you, before you raise any more dust." The parlor was rather gloomy, with maroon stripes going up and down the walls, and dark gold stripes going across the chairs, and crimson velvet curtains which were drawn shut. On the up and down stripes hung a portrait of a woman with Caddy's light eyes and sooty lashes. The most beautiful child in the village, thought Neriah, remembering what Caddy had said about her mother. The Turkish carpet was beautiful, all deep reds and blues, and Neriah tiptoed onto it as though they would keep it from getting dirty. She caught a glimpse of her wild hair in a heavy gold frame mirror, and she glanced down at her grab-back mittens and bright red stockings, feeling as mismatched and out of place as she ever had at Aunt Hortense's. A little yellow canary sat in a cage on the parlor table, and Neriah began to wiggle her fingers between the bars. "No fingers, please!" A woman stepped from the shadow of the bay window and tossed a cloth over the cage. Neriah's hand leapt back to her side. "Poor Bertie's upset by our trip yesterday." "At least he didn't scream the way you did," said Caddy. Caddy's governess wore a black witch until now. Neriah thought she hated Aunt Hortense, had often worn black. She said it was slimming, but this was quite a different kind of black, glimmering in the firelight with hints of green and blue, and there was probably no one less like Aunt Hortense in the whole world. Neriah couldn't stop looking at the floaty golden hair and the huge blue eyes, the neck like a swan, she told herself. "We want to play dress-up," said Caddy. "You'll have to tell me where they are," said Miss D'Estafier. "I knew where everything was in the Abbeyburg house, but here," she encompassed with a sweep of her arm the new house she'd seen only yesterday for the first time. Her voice was light and laughing, and the very movement of her hand through the air released a smell of sweet violets. "Papa," said Caddy. A shadowy sort of man rose from a chair in the corner. Neriah hadn't noticed him before because he'd chosen to sit in the coldest part of the parlor. "I'm so glad you found a friend," said Mr. Winter, nodding at Neriah in a rather melancholy way. "I wonder if I can persuade Wilkes to bring the dress-ups downstairs." His face didn't quite match up with itself. Neriah realized after a moment, with its youngish pink lips, middle-aged mustache, and oldish thinning hair, he had fun thinking he must have been put together from 3 different men. Wilkes brought the dress-ups into Caddy's bedroom, which was on the ground floor in the library because it was now too difficult to get her up and down the stairs in the real bedrooms. "It's not nearly as nice as my loft," thought Neriah smugly, even before she could really see, for the lamp was not yet lit. A great white shape loomed over the dimness, and she reached out to touch the eyelet drapes of the canopy bed. When Mr. Winter turned up the lamp, dark wooded paneled walls swam into view, and the glass-fronted bookcases glinted, and then he vanished in his shadowy way, leaving the girls alone together. It took a steamer trunk to hold all of Caddy's dress-ups. "These could be the Snow Queen's shoes," said Caddy, holding up a pair of silver slippers. Neriah reverently picked up a lace shawl and a single lavender glove, but Caddy casually rummaged through the frothy, shining pile until she came upon a pink silk dress. "My papa says this goes with my complexion." Neriah put on a purple taffeta dress, which was far too big for her and all but stood up by itself. "It clashes with your red hair," said Caddy. "Titanian, not red," said Neriah, swirling the lace shawl over her shoulders. "My beautiful Titanian hair." She spun round and round, loving the whisper of lace and the crackle of taffeta. "Ah, I have an idea. Let's sneak into the little broom closet under the stairs. That'll be our secret place, and we'll call it the Broomarium." "Broomarium?" said Caddy. "A blush came to her cheeks, and Neriah saw how the pink dress did suit her beautifully. "And you'll be the scout and go on ahead and see whether any of the enemy is around. We can't let them see us." Neriah put a finger to her lips. "You have to whisper. The enemy has ears as well as eyes." She peered out the door. "All clear." The wheelchair was very heavy, and pushing Caddy around the door jamb hurt Neriah's wrist. "But valiant spies never complain," she whispered. The taffeta made a terrible rustling noise as they crept down the hall. The mops and brooms clattered when Neriah pushed the chair through the tiny doorway. They left the door open a crack, for they had no other light, and she and Caddy stared at each other in the not-quite darkness. Neriah held up a finger for silence. There came the sound of heavy footsteps and the sweeping of skirts, now muffled where they dragged across the carpet, now crisp and almost bright on the floor. "Where can those girls have gotten to?" muttered Bertha. The air smelled of chocolate when she passed. "She has cocoa for us," whispered Caddy, and they pressed their hands to their mouths to keep from laughing. "And now for the mission of our secret club," said Neriah. "We have to make the story of the Snow Queen into a play for the revels, so listen carefully." Caddy leaned forward, and a slant of light through the door was reflected diagonally into her eyes. "At the beginning," said Neriah, "a demon's mirror broke, and when the pieces fell to earth, a piece got into Kai's heart and another in his eye." "How did it get in his heart?" said Caddy. "Did it go right through his skin?" Neriah had wondered about that herself. "I think it was magic, and it melted through." Caddy was already caught in the story's enchantment, and Neriah made her voice smooth and rhythmic so as not to break the spell. The almost dark was just frightening enough to thrill, and she told Caddy how Kai's heart froze solid and everything she saw looked ugly to him. After that, he was always mean to Gerda, but she still loved him and was heartbroken when the Snow Queen stole him away. Neriah had read the story so many times that she'd memorized the part where Gerda finds Kai in the Snow Queen's palace. The palace walls were made of driven snow, and the windows and doors made of biting winds, and they were lighted by the brightest northern lights. Neriah made her voice into a spooky whisper. Immense and cold were the Snow Queen's halls. She swept the shawl from her shoulders, and the white lace billowed like blowing snow, casting a magnified shadow of itself against the wall. This reminded Neriah of something, and when she struggled to name it, a fragment of melody came to her. "Lace-dappled grove," she whispered. It was part of an old song that Avie had taught her. "My love, take me a-walking in the purple dawn, through the lace-bedappled grove, but spotted fawn." "Why are you moving your lips?" said Caddy. "I'm just remembering the story," said Neriah rather coolly, for she would not share the Avie song with anyone. The singing time was her own special thing, and it belonged to her alone. "Immense and cold," said Caddy, reminding Neriah where she'd gotten to. "And Gerda shed hot tears which fell upon Kai's chest, and with those tears she melted the ice in the heart." Neriah drew out the end of the story, and to keep the secret magical feeling alive, she curled her fingers into secret handshake positions. Caddy twined her plump fingers into Neriah's thin ones. "Well, well, wishing well," they chanted. Caddy looked up, and again the light slanted through her eyes. "How can I act in a play if I can't walk? That's the thing I want most in the world." And there was something about the dark and the warmth of Caddy's hand that made Neriah hear the desolation behind Caddy's carefree voice. "We'll get your papa to make a wish," said Neriah. "He's afraid to," said Caddy. And it was this reminder of how cruel the well could be that made Neriah think of one of the nastiest tricks. "Ooh, Caddy, does Miss Destifer know if you wish for more wishes you get stuck as the new guardian?" "No, but we can't warn her about it," said Caddy. "The well's a secret. She didn't believe in magic until yesterday, and now she thinks someone has cast a spell. Don't worry, she'll never find out about the well." Caddy bent closer until Neriah could feel the heat from her cheek. "So you have to make a wish for me, don't you see?" Neriah drew her hand from Caddy's and pressed a finger to Caddy's lips. "I can't make a wish. The Avie would never let me, but your papa could. We'll work on him, little by little. That's the way you have to do it with grown-ups. First, you have to find a way to say the wish, and so it won't go wrong. The Avie will think of something. He knows everything about making wishes. And then your papa can't refuse." "Maybe not," said Caddy doubtfully. "We'll tie knots in our hair for luck," said Neriah, demonstrating with her wiry coppery hair. Caddy tied a knot in her own sleek dark hair, and then She grasped Mariah's hand once more. Well, well, wishing well, they said again, in dark and solemn ceremony. Later, after Nariah returned from the mountain and gone to bed, she woke at midnight filled with thoughts of her new friend. She thought about how Caddy felt sick on the very day of their last awful wish. Nariah didn't believe in coincidence, not where the wishing well was concerned, and her eyes opened wide as she thought about this. The fire in the stove below had burned away to nothing, and the night was all a piece of blackness. But then the darkness began to sift into familiar patterns, the tent-shaped space beneath the roof, the curve of the snowshoes above the rafters, the bulge of her Sunday dress hanging from a hook. She shut her eyes, but light began to flow through the thin membrane of her lids, gaining in brilliance and intensity. She opened her eyes again to see what it was and had a squint for a moment, and then she wished she hadn't, for what she saw was a luminous smoke sculpture of Caddy's face hanging bodiless before her. Nariah clutched at her blanket like a baby. Her palm turned the wool damp and clammy, and she tasted salt above her lip. She mustn't tell the Avy. If he knew the face had come again and that it was Caddy's face, he might forbid her to see Caddy, and that would be unbearable. Gradually, the smoke face dimmed and began to disintegrate like someone rotting, thought Nariah, wishing she'd never read a single ghost story. She waited until it had faded into nothing and then pulled the blanket over her head. I mustn't tell them, she said to herself. I mustn't tell the Avy.